They said no one could survive that storm. Yet my house did. Now the HOA says I caused it. So tell me, how do you defend yourself when survival becomes your crime? When I built this place, it wasn't to make a statement or impress anyone. I didn't care about curb appeal, resale value, or what Karen and her perfectly trimmed little HOA kingdom 200 feet away thought of my bunker-style concrete or solar water filters. I built it because I know what storms can do. 30 years of flying commercial jets over the Gulf gave me a front-row seat to Mother Nature at her worst, and I had no intention of letting her flatten me in retirement. The land itself was dirt cheap, almost suspiciously cheap. But that's just how southern Louisiana is, swampy, scarred by storms, yet stubbornly beautiful. I bought 1.88 acres of wild overgrowth, sitting just outside the neat little grid of Grandwater shores. Their pastel cookie-cutter houses stopped at a line of pine and cypress trees. That's where my world began. The county line twisted through the woods like a snake, and I made absolutely sure every deed, survey, and zoning record showed my land was on the right side of it. The house went up low and tight, half sunk into the ground with walls thick enough to stop a truck. I added steel storm shutters, hurricane glass, and a foundation that ran deeper than most people's patience. My shed held tools and backup fuel. My water tank had its own UV system. And my generator? She purred like a cat on bourbon, independent, quiet, resilient, just the way I wanted to live. That didn't sit well with the HOA. They started showing up soon after I moved. Polite at first, handing out brochures. Join the community, they said. Be part of something bigger, as if asphalt trails and ornamental. Mailboxes somehow made. Neighbors care about each other. I declined, politely at first, then firmly and finally through a cease and desist letter from my attorney after they tried to annex my parcel. With the parish zoning board, that little stunt cost them a small fortune in legal fees. Round one, me, but they didn't stop. A year later, someone mysteriously updated the HOA boundary map to include my land. A cute trick. Unfortunately for them, I had the original plat registered, stamped and notarized. The court laughed them out of the room. Next, they tried a community action day, setting up folding tables and flyers, trying to rally my non-existent neighbors to sign a petition to force me in. They didn't even make it 10 feet past the tree line, my no trespassing sign, and me standing there in camo with a chainsaw. Stopped. The whole operation cold. They packed up faster than they arrived. Eventually, the court ruled that Grandwater Shores and its representatives were prohibited from contacting me or trying to incorporate my land. I framed that ruling and hung it in the shed right below the bourbon shelf. For a while, the peace held. I worked on the house, planted raised beds, and cleaned up the back edge of the woods. Some days I didn't see another soul, which suited me just fine. SUVs would sometimes idle at the edge of my fence, their drivers taking photos of my bunker house. They didn't understand why I'd gone to so much trouble, why I dug into the earth, why I put up steel shutters in a parish, where optimism apparently passed for hurricane protection. But I didn't explain. You can't explain the storm to people who've only ever known blue skies. Then the wind came. They called it Imogene, a pretty name for something that tore through. Rooftops like they were napkins. The alerts lit up like a Christmas tree on overdrive. Evacuation orders, flood maps, warnings of biblical-level destruction. I checked the generator, double-bolted the main door, brought the cats inside, and waited. You don't fight a storm like that. You just brace for it and pray your math was right when you poured the concrete. When it hit, it sounded like God himself was trying to start over. The world outside disappeared into screaming wind, trees bending like they were made of straw, and rain that came at you sideways. Every now and then I could hear debris scraping across the roof, like fingernails on metal. For a moment it reminded me of being in the cockpit during bad turbulence over open water, that same helpless, gut-deep feeling. So I poured another cup of coffee, sat back, and went back to my book. That's what I'd built the house for, to ride out the rage. I didn't know it then, but that storm wasn't just tearing through buildings. It was about to rip open reputations, assumptions, and boundaries. It was the kind of disaster that makes people desperate for someone to blame. And somehow that someone was about to be me. I didn't open the door until the second morning. The wind had gone silent hours earlier, but I wasn't in a hurry to see what was left of the world. The silence when I finally stepped outside was worse than the noise had been. Everything looked shredded. Trees stripped bare, fences flattened, roofs caved in. The ground was littered with shingles, broken glass, twisted metal, even a kayak sitting in the middle of my gravel drive. Not a drop of water in sight. The smell was a cocktail of rot, seawater, and insulation. I scanned the tree line. half expecting to see Karen and her HOA, crew crawling out like zombies from a bad movie. But the woods stood still, broken but quiet. Against my better judgment, I decided to walk toward Grandwater Shores. The closer I got, the worse it looked. 18 houses were damaged beyond repair. 2 were completely gone, just slabs and pipes where homes used to be. The streets were littered with furniture, fragments of fences, and somebody's kiddie pool hanging from a power line like a trophy. I found survivors, dazed, bleeding, in shock. I helped dig a woman out from under what was left of her porch. She didn't say a word, just grabbed my arm like I was the only thing keeping her grounded. I carried an old man half a mile to a church that had opened as a shelter. I even gave up my backup generator to a guy with 2 toddlers and a diabetic wife. Not because I like those HOA folks, but because no one deserves to suffer like that. I didn't see Karen anywhere, not yet. 3 days after the storm, the mail showed up. Yeah, actual mail. That's how you know civilization's trying to pretend it's still standing. A FEMA truck rolled past, followed by the county jeep, and right behind it, a postal worker tossing damp letters into crooked mailboxes. I found one envelope laminated and taped to my gate like it was a diploma. Legal letterhead, official seal. I thought it was just another HOA tantrum about my disruptive lawn. Then I saw the number, 10-184-233. I blinked, read it again. The number didn't change. The letter claimed I was financially responsible for Grandwater Shores. Restoration, houses, landscaping, everything, because my home hadn't taken any damage and I'd refused to participate in collective stormproofing measures. But the kicker was this line: your anomalous immunity from environmental damage raises concerns of intentional exposure, deflection, or non-participatory safeguarding behavior which may be legally actionable. They were accusing me, officially, of somehow directing a hurricane away from my house and into theirs. I sat down in the dirt and just stared at the letter. My house surviving had become my crime. I scanned it and sent it to Raymond, my attorney. When he called me back, he was laughing so hard I thought he might pass out. "That's not a lawsuit," he wheezed. "That's an acid trip printed on legal paper." Still, his voice dropped. "But Miles, if they're serious, this is going to get ugly." He was right. That night, the first post appeared online, a drone photo of the destroyed neighborhood, with one perfect house in the center, mine, captioned with one word. Coincidence? The likes started climbing. By the next morning, my phone was exploding. I wasn't just a guy who'd survived a hurricane anymore, I was the guy who caused it. Someone stitched together satellite footage and claimed my roof reflected radar, waves that redirected the storm. Another post accused me of building a secret bunker that disrupted natural airflow, and my personal favorite, that my concrete foundation was made with some kind of military-grade vibration tech. I laughed at first. But when I saw the local news picking it up, my stomach turned. Within 48 hours, people were driving up to my gate just to take pictures. A few even threw rocks at the sign that said, "Private Property." The HOA board, what was left of them, released a statement saying they were seeking full restitution from me for unnatural structural preservation. Whatever that meant. They were spinning my survival into a scandal. I called Raymond again. "They're losing their minds," I said. "No," he replied, his tone flat. "They're building a case." He was right again. The county inspector showed up next, clipboard in hand, pretending to check my property for post-disaster compliance. But it was clear he wasn't here to inspect. He was here to intimidate. He snapped photos of my foundation, the gutters, even the generator room. I asked him what he was looking for. He muttered something about environmental irregularities and left without another word. That night, a drone hovered outside my window. I stepped onto the porch and aimed a flashlight at it. It zipped off like a guilty fly. 2 hours later, a clip of me menacingly confronting a drone was trending online with the caption, "The storm sorcerer protects his secret." I didn't sleep much after that. I could hear trucks stopping on the road at night, voices whispering beyond the trees. My security camera feed started glitching. Every few minutes, the screen would flicker and then show static, like someone was trying to jam the signal. On the 4th day, a black SUV pulled up at the gate. Out stepped a woman in a gray suit, hair tied back like she was carved from concrete. She introduced herself as Ms. Hawthorne, from the Federal Environmental Oversight Commission. I didn't even know that was a real thing. "Miles," she said in a voice so calm it was unsettling, "we need to talk about your house." I asked if she had a warrant. She smiled and handed me a stack of papers. "Executive authorization," she said. "You can read it, but it won't change anything." They went through every inch of my property, took soil samples, drilled tiny holes in the walls, measured radiation levels, even scraped the surface of my storm shutters. It felt less like an inspection and more like a witch trial. When I finally snapped and demanded an explanation, Hawthorne looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your structure withstood sustained Category 4 winds with no structural failure. Statistically, that's impossible. We're verifying whether your materials or systems meet national compliance." Translation: you shouldn't have survived. By evening, the SUVs were gone, but they left the place feeling colder, somehow like they'd taken something invisible with them. That night, I got another letter from the HOA, this time demanding I vacate my property until an official environmental audit was complete. It was signed by Karen herself, apparently alive, though I hadn't seen her since the storm. The next morning, I finally did. She was standing at the edge of my driveway in a neon raincoat, clipboard in hand like nothing had happened. Her house was gone, reduced to splinters, but there she was, the queen without a castle, ready to wage war again. "You think you're clever, don't you, Miles?" she sneered. "While our homes were ripped apart, yours stood untouched. And now you expect us to believe it's luck?" I told her I built my house by the code, her own HOA code, in fact. She laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't belong to someone sane. "Codes don't stop hurricanes," she said. "Deals do." And then she walked away, leaving muddy footprints on my gravel like she'd just cursed the ground. That was when I knew this wasn't about money anymore. This was personal. Raymond didn't waste time. He walked into that fight like a man who'd rather eat glass than lose. We started pulling at threads, property records, FEMA reports, whatever we could get our hands on, and the deeper we probed, the stink got worse. For starters, the HOA's so-called insurance, ghosts on paper, policy numbers that led nowhere, and certificates printed to look real but empty when you cross-checked them with the state database. Raymond called an old contact at FEMA who confirmed what we suspected. Grandwater Shores had nothing valid covering them. People had been paying into something that didn't exist while their leaders pocketed the cash. That discovery hit like an axe. It explained why so many neighbors had gone from grateful to hostile so fast. Betrayal cuts deeper than a storm. Then came the manila folder at my gate, a USB and a note that said, "If you want the truth, look inside." I scanned it like a paranoid fool and found internal emails, spreadsheets, ledger lines disappearing into offshore accounts, and a memo titled Phase 3 Consolidation Plan. It was corporate speak for push out the holdouts, with a map that circled my parcel and labeled me high priority resistance. The folder felt like a rope with a noose on the end. The next day, a weary man named Tom Brady, no relation to the quarterback, showed up on my porch. He'd been the HOA treasurer until a week ago and handed over a second drive, eyes hollow with regret. "I can't be seen," he said. "They'll come for me, but I can't keep doing this." He left before I could ask how deep the rot went. We hit them back in court. Raymond's filing was surgical: defamation, harassment, violation of the old injunction that barred the HOA from contacting me, and a counterclaim that would force discovery deep into their books. The courtroom that day hummed like an old engine. Grandwater Shores lawyers came in looking polished and sure. Karen arrived late, powdered and piteous, a heroine auditioning for pity. Raymond opened with engineering reports. FEMA certified inspections showing my build. Exceeded required hurricane standards, and then slid folder after folder across the bench. Bank transfers, forged insurance certificates, emails discussing shell companies, and consulting fees. Gasps rolled through the room. Then Raymond dropped the tape. It was Karen's voice, recorded candidly, saying, "Let the wind do the heavy lifting. Wallner will drown in paperwork." The room went ice cold. She tried to claim the recording was illegal. Raymond had already sealed the chain of custody, and Louisiana's one party. Consent law did the rest. The judge read the charges, sighed, and then handed down a preliminary ruling that felt like sunlight through storm clouds. The HOA had no standing to sue me. They'd violated an existing injunction, and there was probable cause to look into their financial practices. My counterclaim was accepted, and a referral to the DA was ordered. Karen's confident face shrank the moment. She realized the story she'd been writing about me was collapsing. The fallout was immediate. Reporters swarmed. County officials carted out filing cabinets and seized hard drives from the community center. The local news ran the arrest bulletin. Karen was picked up in Denver on suspicion of wire, fraud, and misappropriation. She'd liquidated properties and shuffled money to offshore accounts while selling homeowners fake protection. the parish sheriff said. Investigators were exploring coordinated financial abuse across more than one HOA. 9 months earlier, no one around here had thought that was possible. Now it was headline news. 18 families who had once glared at me in the courthouse were now suing Karen personally after learning their so-called insurance was a house of cards. People raged. A neighbor tried to kick in her old door. I didn't gloat. I'd handed my evidence to the court and let it do its work. When the county finally handed me the official dissolution notice, Grand Water Shores, Incorporated, dissolved, I felt something odd. Not victory, exactly, but release. Trucks arrived to remove boxes of records. The county sealed off rooms, took statements, and started a long, messy unspooling of a scheme that had been propped up by fear and habit. I bolted a new metal sign on my gate. Stop. Private property. Not a member of any HOA. Trespassers will be photographed, reported, and publicly mocked, part joke, part warning, and I installed motion cameras to make sure the mocking portion had evidence. Raymond cashed our settlement, $2 million and change, and I buried the cold wallet's key under the pecan tree because peace of mind is cheap insurance. Tom came by weeks later with an old wooden box containing the original HOA charter signed in a naive hand. I burned the brittle paper in the wood stove and poured a double. That night, the cypress buzzed with cicadas, and the air smelled like honeysuckle and ozone, clean, in a way I hadn't smelled since before the fight. Weeks turned into months, and Grand Water Shores was no longer a place. It was a memory. The sign at the entrance had been ripped down, and in its place a patch of wild grass started to grow. The HOA that once controlled everything, from mailbox colors to grass height, had been swallowed by its own greed. Most of the homeowners sold their lots for pennies, moved inland, and left behind skeletons of half-rebuilt homes. Only a few stayed, the stubborn ones, the ones who realized I hadn't been the villain after all. They'd wave when they saw me, sometimes stop by with coffee or pie, offering quiet apologies they didn't owe me. The federal agents eventually dropped their investigation into my house after finding nothing unnatural. Their final report said my survival came down to exceptional engineering and non-standard fortification methods. That line made me laugh. I'd built that house myself, board by board. After losing everything in another storm years ago, no secrets, no magic, just patience, planning, and a refusal to trust people who write rules for profit. Karen didn't go quietly. Even from jail, she tried to spin her story. Claimed she was framed, said I'd hacked her systems, called me the storm conjurer in one bizarre interview that made her sound more like a tabloid headline than a person. Eventually, she took a plea deal. 5 years in prison, with restitution and community bans on managing any housing association again. It wasn't justice in full, but it was enough. Raymond, the lawyer, called me one evening while I was out on the porch watching the sunset pour through the trees. "You realize you've become kind of a local legend, right?" he said. I chuckled, sipping my coffee. "Yeah, well, legends are just stories people tell when they don't know the truth." The truth was simpler. I'd just stood my ground. I didn't bend when the storm came, natural or human. A year later, FEMA sent a survey crew through to document storm-resistant structures for a national study. They spent half a day at my place, measuring walls and foundations, asking questions about material ratios and drainage. The lead engineer, a kid barely 30, looked around like he was standing inside a miracle. "You know," he said, "if everyone built like this, we'd have a lot fewer disasters." I told him. "If everyone thought for themselves, we'd have fewer HOAs too." He laughed and wrote it down. When the report came out, they dubbed my design the Wallner model. I didn't ask for that name. But I didn't fight it either. It stood for something, the idea that a man's home shouldn't depend on other people's incompetence. Sometimes I still drive past the old Grand Water signpost. The area's quiet now. Just the whisper of wind through the reeds, and the occasional heron skimming the water. Nature took back what greed tried to own. The last thing I did, before leaving that road for good, was hang a small wooden plaque on the post. It said, "When the storm came, they built excuses. I built a home." And with that, I drove away, leaving behind the ruins of control, the ghosts of greed, and one stubborn, storm-proof truth. If you build with integrity, no hurricane, human or otherwise, can tear it down.